The morning rush at Harbour Bin Cafe was always loud. Espresso machines hissed. Customers chatted over breakfast. Orders were called across the counter every few seconds. For most people, it was just another busy coffee shop. For 12-year-old Sophie Lang, it felt overwhelming. Born profoundly deaf, Sophie experienced the world differently. She couldn't hear the blenders. She couldn't hear her name being called. She relied on expressions, gestures, written notes, and American Sign Language to communicate. Usually, her father accompanied her. But this morning, billionaire entrepreneur Adrian Lang had been delayed by an emergency board meeting. "I'll meet you there in 10 minutes, he texted. "You can do this." Sophie smiled at the message. She wanted to prove she could order coffee on her own. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside the crowded cafe. The line stretched almost to the door. When it was finally her turn, the young cashier smiled. "Good morning. What can I get started for you?" Sophie signed instinctively. The cashier looked confused. "I'm sorry." Sophie pointed to her ears and gently shook her head. Then she tried signing again. Customers waiting behind her began shifting impatiently. One man glanced at his watch. Another sighed loudly. "It's just coffee. Hurry up." The cashier looked embarrassed. "I really want to help. I just don't know what you're saying." Sophie quickly searched for her phone to type her order. At that exact moment, the battery died. Her shoulders slowly dropped. For the first time that morning, she looked frightened. Across the cafe, a man carrying a tray noticed everything. His name was Daniel Carter. A widowed single father raising his 8-year-old son, Noah. Daniel worked nearby as a high school history teacher. Every Friday morning, he and Noah stopped for hot chocolate before school. Noah tugged gently on his father's sleeve. "Dad. I think she needs help." Daniel nodded. "I think you're right." Years earlier, Daniel's late wife, Emily, had been deaf. Learning sign language had never felt like an obligation. It had simply become the language of love inside their home. Even after Emily passed away from illness, Daniel and Noah continued signing together every day so they would never forget the language that had once filled their family with laughter. Daniel walked toward the counter slowly, careful not to startle Sophie. He smiled warmly. Then, without saying a word, he signed. "Good morning. Would you like some help?" Sophie's eyes widened. For a brief moment, she simply stared. Then a huge smile spread across her face. She signed back excitedly. "You know sign language?" Daniel laughed softly before signing. "My family speaks it." Tears immediately filled Sophie's eyes. Not because she was sad. Because for the first time that morning, someone understood her without making her feel different. Daniel turned toward the cashier and translated Sophie's order. A medium caramel latte. Extra foam. And a blueberry muffin. The cashier smiled with relief. "Thank you." She looked at Sophie. "I'm really sorry." Sophie smiled and signed something. Daniel translated. "She says it's okay. She knows you were trying." The tension inside the cafe disappeared. Several customers quietly watched the interaction. Many had never seen sign language before. Noah stepped beside Sophie and signed carefully. "I like your backpack." She laughed and answered. "Thank you. I like your dinosaur keychain." The two children immediately began signing back and forth. Daniel smiled proudly. His son had practiced for years. Nearby customers watched in amazement. One elderly woman quietly wiped away a tear. "I've never seen something so beautiful." A few minutes later, the cafe manager hurried over after hearing what had happened. "I can't believe none of us knows sign language." Daniel smiled kindly. "It's never too late to learn." The manager nodded thoughtfully. "I think you're right." Just then, the cafe doors opened. Adrian Lang walked in wearing a simple suit, unnoticed by most customers despite being one of the country's best-known business leaders. He looked around for Sophie. Instead, he stopped in surprise. His daughter was laughing, signing happily with a stranger and his young son. It was a sight he hadn't seen in weeks. After years of watching people speak around Sophie instead of with her, Adrian immediately recognized something extraordinary. Someone hadn't merely helped his daughter order a coffee. Someone had made her feel fully included. And before the morning was over, that simple act of kindness would begin changing for more lives than anyone inside the cafe could possibly imagine. Adrian Lang quietly watched from the back of the cafe for several moments. He didn't interrupt. He simply observed. His daughter wasn't struggling anymore. She was smiling, laughing, signing confidently with Daniel and little Noah as though they had known each other for years. For Adrian, that moment was priceless. After Sophie received her coffee, she turned toward her father and happily signed. "Dad. He knows sign language." Adrian smiled and signed back. "I noticed." Daniel looked surprised. "You signed too?" Adrian nodded. "My wife was deaf. We learned together." His expression softened. "She passed away when Sophie was 9. Daniel's smile faded gently. "My wife passed away too." The two fathers looked at each other with quiet understanding. No long explanation was necessary. Some experiences create an instant bond. Adrian extended his hand. "I'm Adrian." "Daniel." They shook hands warmly. Daniel had no idea who Adrian really was. To him, he was simply another father. The cafe manager walked over carrying a tray. "Your drinks are on the house today." Daniel smiled. "That's kind, but you don't have to." The manager shook her head. "No. Today you reminded all of us what real customer service should look like." Several customers applauded quietly. An elderly gentleman approached Daniel before leaving. "I've lived 78 years. I've never realized how isolating something as simple as ordering coffee could be. I'm going to learn some sign language." Daniel smiled. "I think someone will appreciate that someday." The following Monday, Adrian invited Daniel to visit Lang Innovations. Daniel assumed it was simply a thank you lunch. Instead, Adrian gave him a tour of the company's headquarters. Thousands of employees worked inside the modern glass building. As they walked through the lobby, staff members greeted Adrian respectfully. Only then did Daniel realize the quiet father from the cafe was one of the country's most successful business leaders. Daniel laughed softly. "So, you're that Adrian Lang?" Adrian smiled. "I was hoping we'd become friends before you found out." Daniel chuckled. "I appreciate that." During lunch, Adrian shared something personal. "My daughter has always been brilliant. But every small everyday interaction, ordering food, asking for directions, meeting new people, reminds her that the world isn't always built for her." Daniel nodded. "I understand." Adrian continued. "I've donated millions to accessibility programs. But watching you speak with Sophie, I realized money isn't enough." "What do you mean?" "I can build technology, but I can't manufacture kindness." Those words stayed with Daniel. A few weeks later, Adrian asked if Daniel would help design a communication training program for Lang Innovations. Not because Daniel was a corporate consultant. Because he understood people. Together they created a voluntary program teaching employees basic sign language and practical ways to communicate respectfully with deaf customers and coworkers. The idea quickly spread. Receptionists learned greetings. Restaurant partners learned how to take simple signed orders. Customer service teams added video support with interpreters. Within a year, dozens of businesses joined the initiative. The movement became known as "Every Conversation Matters." Sophie and Noah often volunteered together during weekend workshops. Children learned signs through games and songs. Parents practiced introducing themselves. People who had once been afraid of making mistakes slowly gained confidence. One afternoon, Sophie stood before a classroom full of students. She signed. "Thank you for learning my language." Daniel translated. Then Sophie smiled and signed again. "Now I want to learn yours even better too." The room erupted into applause. Several years later, Sophie graduated at the top of her university class with a degree in inclusive design. During her graduation speech, she signed every word while an interpreter spoke beside her. She looked toward the audience where Adrian, Daniel, and Noah sat together. "When I was younger," she signed, "I thought the hardest part of being deaf was silence." She paused. "Then I discovered. The hardest part is feeling invisible." She smiled. A single father changed that with one simple question. On the large screen behind her appeared the words Daniel had signed the day they met. "Would you like some help?" Sophie continued. "Those 6 words reminded me that inclusion begins with kindness. It doesn't require perfection. It only requires someone willing to reach out." The audience stood for a long ovation. After the ceremony, Adrian quietly thanked Daniel. "You helped my daughter order a cup of coffee." Daniel laughed. "I think she did that herself." Adrian smiled. "No. You gave her something much bigger. You reminded her that she never has to face the world alone." Daniel looked toward Sophie and Noah laughing together. "I think they reminded all of us." People remembered the story because a deaf billionaire's daughter struggled to order a simple coffee until a humble single father spoke to her in sign language. But those who knew their whole story understood that the real miracle wasn't the coffee order. It was the moment one act of compassion inspired businesses, schools, and communities to become more welcoming, proving that the strongest connections are built not through wealth or status, but through the simple decision to meet another person in the language of understanding.